Hello and welcome to Filmcast Without a Cause. I'm Jacob Rosdale.
And I'm Patrick Boberg. And if you want to join the show, it's pretty easy. You can tweet at us. You can send us an email. All that and more is available at filmcastwithoutacause.com.
And Patrick, I was thinking of doing this whole show in a bad Arnold impersonation. What do you think about that idea?
Do it now.
I don't think our listeners would stick with us very long if we did that. But I'm so excited to talk about The Last Stand later in the show. But of course, we start off the show with movie news. And there was a lot of news this week, Pat. We had to bump a lot of stories.
I know. It kind of made me sad. But we'll deal with what we deal with because the 3 or 4 that we've decided on are kind of pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big to us anyway. Of course, the big news in the movie world this week is that Disney finally announced a director for Star Wars, and it's one of the people I initially had written off as no way in heck they're going to do it, J.J. Abrams.
Has he officially come out and said, yes, I'm doing it, or has Disney announced, yes,
Disney
he's doing
sent out a press release just at the end of the weekend.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, so it is official. It is a done deal. It's not, we're not going to look like total morons at the, when this comes out and it's already been disproven. At least I hope not.
What's your initial reaction? I mean, I know that was the person you were behind the most, but are you excited beyond compare?
Yeah, I don't know about beyond compare, but I am pretty pleased with this. I've gone on record on the show as being a JJ fanboy since Alias on. I got called out on Facebook for not having watched it all Felicity, but I'll get around to that at some point, I'm sure. But I have a theory about this. I think Disney is trying so hard. It's doing everything it can to please internet fanboys. And little do they know that it's impossible to please internet fanboys. Because, I think
I think it's interesting, and it's obviously one of the top 5 that was mentioned on every list, along with, Josh Whedon and Brad Bird, that people really wanted to see directed. So if it's directing and maybe even writing at this point, I think they've got 2 solid people that they have something they can work with.
Well, not just 2, because as well as announcing Abrams as director, they also announced that there will be additional consultants on this film, including Simon Kinberg and Lawrence Kasdan. And Kinberg isn't that big of an announcement. He's kind of a Hollywood go-to script guy. But having Kasdan on there, that's what is about my theory about Disney doing everything it can to try and please the fans, because Kasdan directed Empire Strikes Back, what is mainly considered by many to be the best Star Wars film. So to have him as a consultant, which is literally the same title George Lucas has, is kind of, hedging their bets a little bit. I'm like, come on, you really need to get excited for this guy. We're bringing in the guy who did Empire.
Now, I know you posted something on Facebook about this and got a few comments back and forth, which I read a couple of them. Is there anything that you read or heard from anyone personally that gave you some thought?
Well, Brenton Richardson, my buddy, he wrote that when this news came out, he immediately thought of Bryan Singer when he saw this news.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And how a lot of fans were incredibly excited about the direction of X-Men after X2, but it was his dream to direct Superman, Ratner's, and he left to do Superman Returns to lift heavy things, and both franchises suffered for it. And he says, fortunately, Fox is not involved in this situation, so maybe it won't turn out so bad. That did give me a little bit of pause just thinking about that, because Abrams, when he took the Star Trek job, he kept talking about how he was not a Star Trek fan, he was more of a Star Wars guy. And if you see Star Trek, you can see that he obviously is influenced by Star Wars just by the little aliens he puts in there, and the kind of the roguish quality he gives Captain Kirk. So I guess the question a lot of people are having is whether he spent all of his good, energy turning Star Trek into Star Wars, that he won't have anything left for Star Wars.
Interesting, because I would say I'm not as huge a J.J. Abrams fan as you are, but I would say after watching Trek Nation last week, which is a documentary made by Gene Roddenberry's son about Star Trek and coming to terms with who his father was, that I think I agree, he's a better fit for Star Wars than Star Trek, because in that movie, George Lucas said that, he was definitely influenced by Gene Roddenberry, what he came up with in the 60s. But his movies are much more of what people would call a space opera. They're not morality tales like many of the original series episodes were, where it was about contemporary ideas put in the future and people interacting with them, or maybe how people would interact in the future if we had gotten over all of our prejudices and things like that. And just seeing the movies and TV shows that J.J. Abrams put out, they're much more like action-paced and not so much they're not as drama as they are situational sci-fi.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and with his Trek. Where I object is when people start saying that his Star Trek didn't feel at all like Star Trek. I think that's a case of all of the movies being driven to do different things than the TV series were. I mean,
I don't buy that either. I agree that those are wrong assumptions, but I just feel that from his personal history and filmography that I think he is much more in line with being able to produce something that could be monumentally as powerful as any of the first three Star Wars films. And by first three, I mean original three.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments on Facebook and on Twitter or whatever are blah, 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 light flare, lens flares or whatever. I don't think he's going to go lens flare crazy. I mean, he did that in Star Trek, and yeah, Super 8 had a bunch of lens flares. I mean, I guess he's not really a visual stylist like Edgar Wright or Guillermo del Toro. He just kind of found this one thing that anyone can pick up on. And they always bring it up when they talk about him. I think he is under the pressure. With Trek, he was supposed to rejuvenate something. And with Trek, I think it's about taking it back to basics, literally more to that original trilogy. And so I think he's going to play more by the rules set up in that trilogy. I think there's going to be more character effects. I mean, this is all... I'm just speculating here. Mm-hmm. But I think he'll still have an exciting energy to it, but I wouldn't expect it to look like Star Trek, if that's what people are worried about.
Well, I think what people might be worried about most, actually, is that Lance Armstrong biopic. Now JJ's not going to be involved with that as much, and it might suffer, and maybe Star Trek will suffer, Star Wars will suffer, because he's involved in that. It's just two bad projects going on at once.
I think there should be one big sigh of relief. I saw this on Twitter last night. M. Night Shyamalan tweeted to Slash Film, and he said, "Looks like JJ beat me to it. Can't wait to see what he does with it. I'm getting my next film together now. Details to come." The way that was written made me think that maybe he was actually a serious contender for it, and he just found his news through Slash Film. I don't know.
No, that's straight from the Weinstein school of marketing, where you just say something that makes people react. Like, was M. Night almost the director of the next Star Wars film? Chances not. He just wants you to think that he was.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to think about it. Completely switching gears, unless you have more to say about Abrams and Trek.
No, but okay. I do have something science fiction related with our next discussion.
Oh, really? Well, I'm not very familiar with this, so you're going to have to fill me in. Apparently,
Inherent Vice is... okay, well, Paul Thomas Anderson is doing a new film. His next film is called Inherent Vice, which is about, I think, a noir detective book from the... Yeah, I kind of...
It's based by... I thought we were talking Bored to Death.
Originally, it was going to have Robert Downey Jr. in it. And the news this week is that he has to pull out, and he's being replaced with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, this book...
1969.
This movie is about... it's based on a book by Thomas Pynchon, and it's kind of about a... I guess you would call it a private eye who's also a stoner. It sounds very... The Long Goodbye. I don't know if he was a stoner in that, but kind of a shaggy dog detective tale, right?
Yeah, I saw The Long Goodbye about a month ago, and I can't remember. I think there was some scenes. His neighbors were definitely potheads.
But yeah, I guess the big news, I mean, we've known that PTA was going to be making this adaptation for a while, but the big news is that Robert Downey Jr. is being replaced by Phoenix, which is kind of a disappointment, as much as I like Joaquin Phoenix and his work with P.T. Anderson. How do you feel about this?
I agree. I like it when directors, branch out and do something new with, new lead actors. Thinking about Tim Burton with Johnny Depp, or maybe even Martin Scorsese with, he's got two people he's worked with a ton, being Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. But I don't know. I was kind of excited to see probably the director that I anticipate most, because he does a film for a while there, it was a long stretch, but now he's only doing one every 3 or 4 years, and having maybe the hottest actor in, at least in science fiction films, but being Iron Man and the Avengers. But it's kind of sad that he's not going to be in it, because he's just got you called him a 10%er. He's the guy that makes movies 10% better. And if Paul Thomas Anderson films are already, in the top 90% of movies, that would just make it something you would have to see.
It's not quite a role. I mean, I can't imagine a role, being written originally for Robert Downey Jr. being taken over for Joaquin Phoenix, because he's such a different type of actor.
Yeah.
So I'm actually kind of more curious to see how if Joaquin Phoenix can do another transformation and really surprise me. I'm bummed about RDJ, but I'm curious to see what Phoenix does with it. I'm just curious about the film in general, because I don't think PTA has really done a genre film yet, and sounds like a straight-up detective movie. I know Variety said that it's PTA's first comedy, which I wouldn't agree with, because I think Punch Drunk Love is kind of funny, and Boogie Nights is really funny. But yeah, sign me up for this one still, even though I will miss Downey Jr. probably.
I could talk about this later with my weekly recommendations, but I actually just watched Punch Drunk Love and read a couple interviews and things about it, and he said he made that movie because he had done a couple films that were ensemble pieces, and people thought he was the ensemble director, so he went and wrote and directed Punch Drunk Love and thought that it was the exact, pretty much opposite. And then, of course, following that up with There Will Be Blood, which is not an ensemble piece in the slightest.
No.
And if this is anything like that, I kind of like the idea that he's going back to, following one guy in a story. And detective dramas are pretty popular, at least in television, so this could be his biggest hit.
When you said you had a sci-fi thought about it, was it just that Robert Downey Jr. was the sci-fi actor? Or?
Actually, that had to do with Punch Drunk Love, because the reason I rewatched it is I've gotten pretty big into, crackpot film analysis on YouTube, where people take movies and break them down to the nth degree. And someone made a very coherent analysis of how Punch Drunk Love is the retelling of the Superman myth and the Superman story. And after watching that analysis, I was like, well, now I have to watch this movie again. So if anybody wants to see that, I'll post the link to that Superman / Punch Drunk Love analysis, and then you can make it up for yourself. The thing about these people who do these things is they're always so dedicated to it that it's almost like, selling a car to a blind person, where you buy into it so easily unless they're completely out of left field.
That's so ridiculous. Well, our next story is the one I actually meant that I knew absolutely nothing about. It was the announcement that there will be a feature film based on the HBO series Bored to Death, which I've never seen, Pat, but I understand you're a fan.
I am a major fan of this TV show, and it's probably one of the two things that makes me upset I no longer have cable, is I didn't get to see the entire final season of Bored to Death, but I love everything about it, just in the way that it bounces from complete slapstick comedy to noir to buddy cop show, and it kind of breaks down, the whole, these are detectives who always get their man and always do it the right way, and then they've got the surprise twist at the end. They, like in this show, it's Jason Schwartzman, Zach Galifianakis, and Ted Danson. They're all pretty much just falling accidentally into success with anything that they endeavor on, and it's just a really interesting show. I'd tell anybody, if they want to check it out, they definitely should. But the movie is going to hopefully come out in what is it? I think I don't think it says actually when this movie's supposed to come out, but just to think that HBO is once again going from one of their TV show properties. I think the only one they've done it before is Sex and the City.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're bringing this to the screen. That's pretty exciting, and I think it could be something great.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely intrigued. I just got HBO, and it's not on the on-demand that I have, so I can't check it out quite yet. But it seems like a great cast and a good premise. And like I think maybe it didn't last so long just because Zach Galifianakis got so huge, or was it just not very well watched? I think it was. They don't really have very good information on their viewership. In fact, I think they almost completely disregard it. But they base things off subscribers, and Excuse me? HBO is more concerned about subscribers than actual viewers, I guess. So.
Yeah, so I don't know if maybe they ran out of stories, or they just thought that they were doing the weekly cop thing a little too much. But the log line for the film is pretty funny in itself. It says that Jonathan, Ray, and George reunite to fight crime, commit crime, lose their minds, and fall in love in a bored to death feature-length slapstick adventure. So I think that sounds pretty enticing, personally.
Well, if it comes around the time of Inherent Vice, it could definitely be a trend for stoner detectives at that point. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, it's been such a busy week, we didn't even really get to talk about Sundance this week, which wrapped up. I don't know if we have much to add. It seemed like the first week was the one filled with the films I wanted to see.
It was pretty exciting to follow it on Twitter last night as the major awards were announced.
Yeah, the same two films won the dramatic category, or the grand jury prizes, as the audience awards, which doesn't happen very often, I'm told. And those films, the documentary being a film called Blood Brother, which is about a man named Rocky Bharat who went to India as a disillusioned American tourist, and when he met a group of children with HIV/AIDS, he decides to stay. It sounds like a pretty heavy documentary, but also, I'm told, quite good, obviously, since it won the documentary prize. And the feature film that won both prizes is one that actually wasn't getting a bunch of buzz until that night. It was a film called Fruitvale, or Fruit Valley, I don't know how to say it, which is based on a true story about a Bay Area resident who, I don't know, I've seen some synopses that totally spoil what happens to this guy, and other ones that just are really vague that say he crosses paths with friends and enemies on the last day of 2008. So I don't know how much I should spoil, but it was a film that was only on my radar because it starred Michael B. Jordan, who was on Friday Night Lights, and he was on Parenthood later, and he's an actor I've been rooting for. He was in that Chronicle film.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. The thing with the grand jury prize, sometimes the film is like Beast of the Southern Wild and becomes a pretty big indie hit, nominated for Oscars obviously, and then other times it's like a couple years ago it was Happy Thank You More Please, the Josh Radnor film, which I don't think a lot of people saw.
Yeah, I think it won the next audience or next of audience award. I don't think it took the overall.
I thought it did. Well, let me do a FWOAC fact check here.
Excellent!
I was wrong about Josh Radnor's Happy Thank You More Please. It won the audience award, but it did not win the grand jury prize. That went to Winter's Bone, another film that went on to get a lot of Academy Awards. So expect to hear about Fruitvale in the future. We'll have to wait and see if it becomes a huge indie hit like some of the grand jury prize does, or if it just kind of fades into obscurity.
What I found pretty interesting about the release of all these awards information was following Twitter. They were saying that the awards people were mainly women, and if you know anything about film, it's kind of called a boys' club at times. And they're saying that Sundance is probably the only major film festival where women take home a lot of awards, and it happens to be a lot of female filmmakers that make it into the show. Part of me wonders if that's maybe part of they want more female filmmakers in there, or if there's a female filmmaker that submits something, if they're more likely to get them into the show.
That's interesting. I don't know who all is a program, how the programming for Sundance work or who's on the jury. But that's all. I mean, was there any other Sundance news that came out this week that had you excited?
Not necessarily. I'm still really sad that I haven't been there, and hopefully one day my bucket list is to go to the Sundance Film Festival.
Yeah, mine as well. Well, with that, let's go to a film that did not play at the Sundance Film Festival and start our feature review of the week, The Last Stand.
Hey, Sheriff. Almost didn't recognize you in plain clothes.
Well, it's my day off. Should be a quiet weekend.
We have a situation.
We've got a cartel with heavy firepower headed towards the border. And there's a strong chance they're coming your way.
I've seen enough blood and death. I know what's coming.
When an escaped drug cartel leader speeds towards the Mexican border in a souped-up automobile, it's up to Arnold Schwarzenegger and a ragtag group of deputies to bring him and an army of mercenaries to justice.
Owen's here. What can I do for you?
Some smartass is flying a jet plane around out here with no lights on.
Boom, 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 boom.
I'm not gonna let that guy come through our town without a fight.
I love the way you walk, and I love the way you talk.
How we gonna go up against all that firepower?
Bang, 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 bang.
I got an idea.
Thanks to a decade-long stint as the Governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger hasn't headlined a film since 2003's Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Now, following a couple of expendable cameos, Arnold is back in the acting saddle as a small-town lawman, in over his head against a team of trained killers, in a plot that seems straight out of a Western, but with a lot more automatic weaponry. Pat, I've gone on record about my affection for Mr. Schwarzenegger. The TV edit of his early action film Commando was one of my first live-action film memories, and I remember it being kind of the first film I engaged with. And like many young men my age, Terminator 2 Judgment Day was my first rated R movie, and it's still one of my favorite movies to this day. In short, we know that I was excited to see Arnold fighting bad guys again, but how eager were you to see the Austrian Oak in a big, dumb action movie again? And to get straight to the point, with The Last Stand, is Arnold back?
I would say he is back. I was not super excited. And last week you said at the end of the show you had to twist my arm to agree to see it. And I don't know if it's that much. I wasn't necessarily super excited to see him in the theater, but I would say Arnold is actually probably the best part of this movie. And I mean, he has to deliver some silly dialogue here and there, but it never felt like forced or something stupid, or like I was watching Junior, or like this guy had come back from because he needed to make movies in like a Stallone type way. And I would say that this might actually even fit up there and better than some of the action movies that he did in the 80s. Are you on board as a major fan?
I will say this will probably age better than some of Arnold's late 90s and 2000s output. I have to say, when this movie began, for the first half of it, I was just struck with disappointment for a little bit. And I think that's my own fault, because I had built this up into my head as being the second coming of this great movie star. Because he's been gone for 10 years. He was my favorite when he left. And when he's back, he is different. He's his line readings are about the same. Like, the movie starts a little awkward as he's trying to be every guy Joe, and that never works in an Arnold movie, because he's basically giving line readings. He still hasn't, despite being in this country for a couple decades, he still sounds, he has that thick accent. But as the movie went on, and I think as the film more played off the fact that this is Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's kind of the Unforgiven thing, where you're playing off of a character's history or an actor's history throughout dozens of roles. When it starts to become about this man, this older guy who's seen the action before, and he knows the bad guys are coming, and it's playing off all these Arnold movies we've seen in the past, that's when I really began to like Arnold again. And the battle between my head and my gut started to win, and I started to have a fun with The Last Stand. But for a good chunk of it, I think my brain was winning, and I was just too distracted about how much of a conservative male fantasy the movie was. You got fast guns. You have you have a fast car. You have a lot of fast cars, American-made cars, mind you. Lots of guns. Lots of jokes involving guns. Every woman in this film is drop dead sexy, even when they don't have to be in the role. Like, there's, and the plot ultimately involves strengthening America's borders. So those things, I was getting too wrapped up in those things and not allowing myself to have fun until that last act, or The Last Stand, have you?
Yeah, I hear you completely with what you're saying, but at the same time, when I saw it, I didn't have any of those expectations, and there were definite parts in it that made me angry with just foolish writing or foolish. They basically skip over the entire state of Arizona as if there's nowhere to stop them at any point. But I kind of went in, just compartmentalized it like you do with, you see a children's film or a comedy or whatever. It's like, I'm not expecting anything high art, and I am expecting it to be Arnold, and understand that at some point they're going to get around the fact that, yes, he has this history, and of course you're seeing Arnold playing an Arnold character, but they build up that, this guy's seen a lot, and he's, eventually they tell you his past in Los Angeles, and it's okay. I find it to be okay because it's not as stereotypical, or they don't build the premise in a blunt manner as, say, they do with the Expendables, where it's pretty laughable with the way that they set up. Hey, we're going to see a bunch of explosions, and here's why. You can kind of accept the way that you see this gentleman who's an immigrant and used to work in Los Angeles is now living on the border to get away from, working in a crew where everybody died except for him. I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad action film at all. I certainly like it more than the Expendables movies. But I think, as you are pointing out, and as I'm pointing out myself, I probably set myself up too high, expecting Arnold to be circa 1992 Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's just one of those things that I remember talking about this with the Expendables too, how it reminds you that you're even like this golden god who was Mr. Universe, ages, and we all age and will eventually die. And I think that's what The Last Stand is ultimately trying to say.
Well, does this make you want to see more of Arnold in his films?
By the end, I think he is still trying to get back into the groove a little bit, especially if the roles are written like this one that kind of address that he's maybe a little washed up, a little older, a little, a little not as slick. But you know what? The thing you said Arnold's the best thing about this film. I don't know if he is. I think the rest of the ensemble cast is pretty good, but I would actually say the MVP of the movie is the director Ji-Woon Kim, who is popular for films he made in South Korea, like The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, and I Saw the Devil. He's known for his visually inventive style. I don't think this film is nearly as good as his Korean film, simply because it is playing off of an American script and it falls into American conventions, where when I watch a Korean horror film or a Korean action film, what surprises me most is how it goes places with the story that an American film wouldn't dare. I'm thinking of the Bong Joon-ho films as well. But I still think he has a future as an action director in Hollywood if he wants to go that route. It reminds me of how John Woo, when he came over to America, he made a very generic action film called Hard Target, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. But it was visually, that film is memorable, and it's the one JCVD film that I have rewatched and want to continue to rewatch because it has that signature John Woo style. I think Woon Kim just needs a face-off script or something really out there to really become a strong action director. But I totally didn't answer your question. Yeah, I definitely want to see Arnold in the 4 or 5 or 6 other movies he has in development or filming now.
Well, when I said that I thought he was the best part of the film, I was thinking that it felt like everything outside of this wasn't anything very inventive. And I don't really notice the visual style in this movie per se, but also it felt like at times there were just too many characters and storylines that they were trying to weave in with Arnold's his supporting squad and the people that they had arrested and the FBI and just seemed like they were building all these things around him without trying to point out who he was. And eventually they get to him. And I think that's kind of the thing that makes sense, that you'd explain who your main character is. But I didn't really buy into anything else. It almost felt like we're going to resolve this couple's love that they've had since high school, even though it seems to have been 15 years or so since then. And that's why I thought that he was the best part, because it didn't really feel like anything was setting itself up to be exceptional outside of maybe his character, the character himself.
Yeah, I do think you are right in that regard. I think it is much more of an ensemble film than what we expect from Schwarzenegger movies, where he is the lone gunman. He is the one thing that's going to stop the bad guys. And the film kind of starts off as this whole, we have to work together to stop this, but it ends with that Arnold as the one, the Superman character.
Yeah, and they've even thrown in like Peter Stormare as the second in command, or the second bad guy that needs to fall before the main character. And it felt like a lot of those action sequences were pretty kind of staged almost, to a point that it's like, okay, this is improbable, but that's what you get out of most Arnold Schwarzenegger action films.
Yeah, no, I think it is very beat for beat what you would expect from an action movie. My problem was just that I think I think 13 or 16-year-old Jacob would have really loved this film. 30-year-old Jacob is now beginning to wonder why it is he loves Arnold so much. But that said, I'm still on board for whatever else he's going to do, because I'm a loyal fan. News broke this week, Pat, that he is actually going to return for Terminator 5. Having seen The Last Stand, do you think he could still pull off that role, though? I don't know what character he's going to play. I mean, he's going to obviously look pretty old. He can't. I don't know if he can pull off the Terminator, body itself, because he's an old man. I mean, is he going to play the person who initially built the Terminator? Because I know in Rise of the Machines, there's like a cutscene like where they show him as a young man, and he's got this hilarious Texas accent or Southern accent, and they're like fashioning the T-100 off of this soldier. Yeah, exactly. I doubt he'll be playing the T-800. It just doesn't make sense that you would make a robot look like 60-something Arnold Schwarzenegger when you can make 20-something Arnold Schwarzenegger. My hope is that maybe they keep saying, like James Cameron when he made Avatar said, we could make a new Dirty Harry movie that's photorealistic CGI or whatever. Not that he wants to make a new Dirty Harry movie, but he was saying we could make realistic looking human beings. And maybe that's what they're going to do with Arnold, to do what they kind of did a little bit in Salvation and carry it throughout. Or on IMDb, he's listed as the T-1000 as a rumor, and I think that's kind of silly, but I don't know.
Maybe they'll bring him back and do the whole Curious Case of Benjamin Button, where they spent so much time on making Brad Pitt look older and younger due to like micro green screen pigment and makeup.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care how they do it. It just kind of warms my heart a little bit to know that he's going to be involved, because it's not quite a Terminator film without Schwarzenegger.
If I were to see, not to go off a tangent here, but if he were to return to a franchise that had once been talked about a sequel that would be realistic to have a sequel, would it be have him return to, say, True Lies or something? It makes sense. I mean, if you're a robot, how are you supposed to be an old man who's a robot without having to do all this magic with CGI and things like that. I think if he were to return to a character and not completely pull a Sylvester Stallone, who every time he's down in his career he'll return to Rocky or Rambo, I'd prefer to see him go to something that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I'm very optimistic about this Conan movie that is in development, because it is supposed to be about an older, more experienced, more weathered Conan. So I don't know. Well, we won't know about those films until the not too distant future, but for now, The Last Stand is in theaters and is rated R for strong, bloody violence throughout and language. When we return, we'll be talking about what's new on DVD and continue our FWOAC Franchise Flashback with Die Hard 2, Die Harder. And we're back, new on DVD this week, the week of January 29th. All Superheroes Must Die. Pat, have you heard about this film?
I've heard the name. I don't really... Oh, yes, this is the guy who made that movie my brother mentioned when he first came on.
Yes, it's from the director of the FP. Yes, and that's the only reason I brought it up here, because I knew maybe we'd need to let Dan Boberg know that this film existed and was coming out on DVD.
But there's nothing involving Dance Dance Revolution in this movie, right?
No, it seems to be like a Saw-type ripoff where they're all superheroes who have to either kill each other or something like that.
And they're not allowed to use their superpowers to save the day, I think.
Yeah, it looks as low budget as it probably is, so I mean, it's good on them for making a movie. I just probably don't have any interest in seeing it. The Cold Light of Day, starring Die Hard star Bruce Willis, Hotel Transylvania, Paranormal Activity 4, and one of my favorite films from last year, Seven Psychopaths, are also new on DVD. Pat, what have you watched this week?
Well, I text messaged you a couple days ago and asked you if you'd seen Slither, and you said you had.
Yeah.
And it happens to be on Netflix. There's actually been a bunch of really good additions to instant streaming lately. And so I watched Slither, and man, that movie is really, really good and inventive for being like a zombie or Invasion of the Body Snatchers style movie, and really funny. And it makes me super excited now to see the eventual Guardians of the Galaxy, because director James Gunn did Slither, he did Super, and now he's doing Guardians of the Galaxy. So that was awesome. What were you had some pretty good thoughts, and you thought that it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I hadn't seen Slither in years, but I remember Nathan Fillion standing out in that, and I wonder why Nathan Fillion isn't being discussed as one of the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, especially now that there was the rumor this week that Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler were in the mix for some character. But I'm like, get Nathan Fillion to voice that talking raccoon, and I will buy 3 tickets.
Yeah, and other things I watched, I saw Red Lights, which seemed like a average X-Files episode. It was watchable. And I watched Punch Drunk Love, I mentioned that. And Sundance actually has a channel for many of the short films that were on at the festival this year. And I'll put a link to that and maybe embed a couple of the videos on our post for this week. But there's some really good short films in Sundance, and they say that is actually one of the most covert ways to make it into filmmaking is if you make a couple of really good short films and get them into Sundance, because that seems to be where a lot of directors come from this day is that film festival in South by Southwest.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that those were out there, so thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. What did you see
last
this week?
Off when we weren't recording, we talked a little bit about John McTiernan and how he had gotten into some legal trouble over the his co-producer of the remake of Rollerball, and we got to talking, and we didn't quite know what Rollerball was all about, and so I went and I saw the original Rollerball, starring James Caan, directed by Norman Jewison. It's a pretty good vintage sci-fi film. I do recommend Rollerball. It kind of has, I mean, now it's kind of with the Hunger Games, the sport as society thing has become kind of in vogue, so it's surprised, I mean, that they aren't trying to remake Rollerball with a bunch of younger people. Well, they tried that and it turned out really bad, but if that hadn't happened, I would imagine that they would be trying that again right now.
Is LL Cool J in the remake?
Yes, LL Cool J, Rebecca Romaine, and Jean Reno, I believe, is the villain in Rollerball. But it's very much about how our society likes violence a lot, and in the movie Rollerball, there aren't countries anymore. They're all companies. Like a company or a city is owned by a company. It's very like social. It's in that way that a 70s film tries to be socially aware and just kind of comes off as cheesy, at least in science fiction.
So is this like the Hunger Games before the Hunger Games?
A little bit. I mean, they're not. I mean, it is a game of life and death.
Sounds like
basically.
the Running Man
people
movie
watch.
you have not seen.
And I haven't seen The Running Man, but this scratched that itch, so I can go another year or so without seeing The Running Man, maybe, putting it off. Another film from last year that I've been meaning to get around to see, Magic Mike, I saw and quite liked. I think the dancing scenes probably are the best part of that. I think the romance is dead in the water, so the stuff in the male strip club is the most interesting. That's all I'll say about that. And a couple weeks ago, we did a show talking about New Year's resolutions, and one of the categories was in the movie blind spot category was films that people go, oh, I can't believe you've never seen. And Rounders was one of those films. Mm-hmm. And I finally saw Rounders because I saw it was going to expire on Netflix Instant. So I can now say I've seen Rounders, and it's not that great. It's an okay movie.
Can you
see
movie. How everybody of our few years in college was obsessed with the characters in that movie, especially the Russian?
Oh yeah, John Malkovich's character is ridiculous in that. It's one of the things that took me out, but maybe if I saw it younger, I would appreciate it more. I can definitely see why it inspired a lot of people to play Texas Hold'em. It definitely makes it an exciting game, but those are all the movies I'm going to talk about now.
Well, then I guess we'll take a real quick break and come back with our FWOAC Franchise Flashback follow-up to Die Hard with Die Hard 2, Die Harder.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock.
Christmas Eve.
Is there a cop on duty around here? Airport police. Go get him.
Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring.
Washington, D.C. International Airport.
What's this about?
Oh, just a feeling I have.
Ouch. When you get those feelings, insurance companies start to go bankrupt.
John McClane is back to deck the halls, except this time he's celebrating in Washington, D.C.'s Dulles Airport, which has been taken over by a covert militia holding the airport hostage in turn for a federal prisoner.
Oh, we are just up to our neck in terrorists again, John.
But for police officer John McClane,
Shit, but I'm right.
it's just another Christmas.
You're the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Story of my life.
2 years after the Nakatomi hostage situation, John McClane finds himself in nearly the same situation. A building being held hostage by villains who have everything planned down to the last detail, and hey, just for fun, it's Christmas again. While the scenario is similar, the stakes are much different. If the villains don't get what they want, they're willing to let planes crash into the earth, killing hundreds of hostages. So everything's bigger, the villains are smarter, the cops are more indignant than ever, and John McClane is still as wry and dangerous as ever. You'd think that would add up to a better film, but before we get any of that, our FWOAC Franchise Flashback series has a series of questions to answer. So Jacob, what is your personal history with John McClane's second bout with cinematic disaster?
Well, I owned this movie on DVD, but until this week, I'd only seen it once. So I've been pretty indifferent towards it, actually. It's not one of those sequels that I see the original movie and then I'm like, oh, now I need to watch Die Hard 2. It's nothing I've felt the need to revisit. And first one, I don't think really begs for the sequel, so I don't know. Die Hard 2, it was never one of my favorites, and I hadn't seen it. I think the first time I saw it was probably right after I saw the first one in around 2000.
Yeah, my history is pretty much the same. I don't really remember much of, when I saw it or its impact on me. And in fact, I even in my notes here said our next question is better or worse than remembered. And I said, this is one of the few sequels that I am completely indifferent to. As you said, the villain's not as good as Hans Gruber and his right-hand man, Carl. But I still enjoy the film, and it's the action's over the top and more than the first one. But if anything, I actually enjoy the interplay between John McClane and his allies more than the original, because there was no real relationship in the first movie. His crew that's helping him out here, they all have their own personality, and they kind of help build the movie. It doesn't make it better than the first film, but it adds something that wasn't in the first movie.
Yeah, it makes it different. I actually do think this is better than I remembered it, simply because having watched it probably in immediate succession from the original Die Hard, it had no choice but to really pale in comparison. But, given a little bit of distance and knowing, where not having just witnessed Die Hard for the first time ever, I can come and look at Die Harder as a pretty strong action movie. And it's probably the one that's a true sequel more than the others, because it literally is kind of repeating the same concept a little bit of a man in over his head in closed quarters. But this time with a little bit more help, as you mentioned. And I don't know if I quite like the supporting cast as much as you, and maybe we'll get to that a little later.
Interesting. So was there a part of the film that you thought was the best part?
Well, the best part is John McClane's sweater at the very beginning. I think that I'm a big fan of that piece of clothing. And I actually do. I think I like the way that the film uses the airport as a unique setting for action set pieces. It does everything you think about or associate with the airport. It has the luggage, caravan, the moving walkway, the runway. It opens up a little bit later when they go to the church or whatever. But I think there's some really fun action sequences that happen using the airport.
Yeah, I completely agree. I said that the best part of the film is probably the power struggles in this film feel a little more realistic than in the first movie. Last week we discussed the cops on the ground, and I thought they were too comedic and foolish to be taken seriously, and they're more kind of like a caricature of what police are in these situations than how they'd act in an action movie, or they're the comic relief, so to speak. Whereas in this movie, the airport cops and the authorities in Washington, D.C., they come off as like, this is our situation. You're just another guy. They're going to run it smartly. They're not going to be doofuses like the FBI people are. And when they get the better of them is taken, it's not as, they're not laughing and, chuckling as they're flying a helicopter to take out the bad guys. They're just kind of taken for fools by the smarter militia. So I thought those power struggles were actually kind of made a little more sense. Now, what I thought was the weakest part is the action and the explosion in this movie are just too grand for their own good.
There's a lot of green screen in it too that really stands out after 20 years or whatever.
And like the things like the helicopter battle and eventual explosion, or the shootouts in the airport. It's like, hey, remember that shootout in the first movie that involved the glass and the windows and that? What if we took it to this level and did this? I don't really know if it was a smart move to say we need to make it better. And they probably should have just gone with the first movie, so true to one man in a building and dealing with this situation. I wish they would have just stuck with that type of action plots a little more. Because I think audiences are much more forgiving if it's more realistic than some giant crazy explosion where you're escaping by an ejector seat.
Yeah, bigger is not always better. And you mentioned in the first film how it is very much one man versus this army. He has a lot of help in this movie, and I owe this observation to Jonathan Gregg, a big diehard fan who I was talking with earlier on, and he was telling me that that's the problem he has with the first and fourth film, or the second and fourth film, excuse me, and I've come to like, hey, that's kind of that's a good point. He is almost, and the supporting casts are like, some of them are pretty annoying. The janitor just really rubs me the wrong way as being a caricature. And Dennis Franz, he plays the same kind of role as the Breakfast Club principal in the first one. I can't remember the actor's name. He's the bureaucrat stopping him from doing what he needs to do. But he's just so much more. I mean, he comes around a little bit more than that character does, but he's kind of annoying. So they're not really characters I enjoyed spending time with that are helping him. But that's more Jonathan Gregg's observation that I stole. If I was to say a weakest part, and you mentioned it earlier, that William Sadler is just not as good of a villain as Alan Rickman is.
Yeah, that's without question.
I think they intentionally wanted to go with a more physical bad guy. He actually fights John McClane on the wing of a plane later on. So they didn't want to go the charming route. I admire that they tried to make it different. But it just wasn't as much. It's just not as much fun to watch. And I like William Sadler as an actor. And if I want to steal another observation Jonathan Gregg made, in order to establish the stakes with William Sadler, they have him destroy an entire airplane filled with people, where all Alan Rickman did was have to kill the boss and Ellis, and then we knew he was a bad guy. But we really had this. They had to prove it to us so badly that they had to kill a whole plane worth of people.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that being something that's, unbelievable. That seems like if this guy were
almost
truly evil
nowadays.
to the core, that makes sense that he would do that.
Yeah, no, I get that.
What about anything that resonated with you that you hadn't noticed before?
Well, the funny thing about this as opposed to the other films we've done sometimes on FWOAC Franchise Flashback, is I barely remembered any of this, save for I remembered that it was set in an airport and that it had nude Tai Chi near the beginning. So pretty much everything was something like seeing it for the first time pretty much. I was surprised by the amount of smoking in this movie, particularly in an airport. And this time I was really taken back by the amount of people who were in the cast that I hadn't recognized before when I saw it. Like Franco Nero, the original Django, is in this, as well as John Amos and Senator Fred Thompson. So cast and smoking is basically what I noticed most of this time. How about you?
Well, when I was looking at the film, I was along the same lines of Colonel Stewart and his build-up, and they show him and his henchmen walking, in closed ranks in a hotel. It felt completely unnecessary. I remember in the past when I was a kid, I thought that was just intense. Mm-hmm. But here, I kind of felt like there was some scenes in this movie along those same lines where they're more comical than I think they were intended to be at the time. Especially that him naked doing Tai Chi or whatever, and then eventually doing like a karate turn off the TV move with the remote. It was... I would be surprised if people in 1990 weren't laughing in the theater at how dumb that part was.
It is pretty ridiculous. Do you think this film adds anything to the story or mythology of the previous film? Does this make Die Hard a franchise?
I don't think this adds anything to the mythology, to tell you the truth. I think, if anything, it's just another fun time on Christmas with John McClane.
Yeah, I think this is totally different than we talked about the Alien series last time we did a FWOAC Franchise Flashback. And that's a film, a series that's built on mythology, or if you're a really nerd, you want to know more about the aliens and whatnot. But each Die Hard movie does have its own identity, for better or worse. And I think all this does is it establishes that McClane has a knack for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if you look at the sequels, I don't know if the newest sequel that's coming out holds this distinction, but every sequel is based off of a book or a script that wasn't originally designed to be Die Hard. They just take that script or that book. This was based on a book called 90 Minutes or something like that. And they place John McClane in and retrofit it, and that's all it takes. You just need to add this Bruce Willis character, and any action movie can pretty much be a Die Hard film.
I think that's almost happened with another movie he was in. I think it was called like The Hostages or something, where he was a police negotiator with a hostage scenario. And for the longest time, this was before like internet buzz was huge. I think it came out in 2001. That was supposed to be Die Hard 3 Die Hard 4. People said so. I didn't really know they were all based on books. I knew this one was based on a book, but
I don't think 3 and 4 are based on books. They're based on screenplays that weren't Die Hard screenplays.
Then that makes me wonder every time I see a movie now, how could I turn this into Die Hard 6?
How could Last Stand would be an easy one, but let's say Silver Linings Playbook, that would have been a jump.
Oh, yeah, that's on after he retires maybe. So what do you think would be changed in this movie if it came out in 2012 or 2013?
Well, they certainly wouldn't blow up a plane. Actually, I don't think they would make this movie today. I don't think they would make an action film with terrorists set in an airport unless it was like a Zero Dark 30 serious film based on a real event. What about you?
I hadn't thought of it, but you're completely right. They probably would not be. They'd be so hesitant to do it. It's almost along the lines of doing a movie about like abortion or something and hoping to get a wide audience. It's just something that terrifies people to the core. But if they did make it, there would probably be much more along the lines of, say, the movie Terminal, where the security in the movie would be completely different.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just get to it, Pat. Where does this film rank in the franchise? 2 films in. Is it better than Die Hard, Die Hard 2?
I don't think it's necessarily better or worse. It's just another John McClane film. If we're going for classic cinema, I think Die Hard is much more the movie to remember. But it's if we're gonna go, give it a weight or a gold medal or silver medal, this is definitely the silver medal out of the 2 we've seen. Eventually, my vote will change on that, but it's not as good as Die Hard.
Yeah, I agree with you. I still don't think I'll be revisiting this one too often, but it is better than I thought. It is a pretty good action film. Much better than, say, the Under Siege movies. But that does it for this installment of the FWOAC Franchise Flashback. Die Hard 2, Die Harder, is rated R, and it is available on DVD and Blu-ray. When we come back, we are going to wrap up the show. Keep listening.
Welcome back to see the end of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to contact us, there are several ways to do it. First, hit us up on the FWOAC phone, 515-412-0737. We always like the brave people who like to give us their thoughts in audio form. If it is PG rated, it will definitely make it on the show. Another way to make it on the show for sure is to leave a comment on filmcast.icause.com. Just log on there, listen to our show, give us your thoughts. If you want to give us some thoughts on a different post, that's fine. Also, you can hit us up on Twitter at FilmcastWOAC, and that is the same handle for our Gmail account, filmcastwoac@gmail.com. Jacob, what's coming out in theaters this week?
Well, it's February, so it's still kind of a dark time for going to see cool new movies, but there are some coming out. They're movies. I don't know how cool they are. Bullet to the Head, the new Stallone film where he fights a guy with an axe, based off of a comic book, which doesn't seem to be that faithful too.
Is there an axe battle in the comic?
There is no axe battle in the comic book.
Well, then I'm not reading that comic ever.
Yes. Haunted in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia. That title makes absolutely no sense. How can it be Ghost of Georgia if it's a haunting in Connecticut? Didn't need to explain
maybe
that.
Maybe Georgia's a person? Or maybe like Georgia the country?
Georgia the country. That's also not in Connecticut. Maybe there's a Georgia, Connecticut. I'll have to map quest that.
Maybe there's a Connecticut, Georgia.
Oh. All right.
That's all the analysis you're going to get from us, folks.
About that. Stand Up Guys, which is a film starring Pacino, Walken. Didn't get too good of reviews from my understanding.
Alan Arkin,
Warm
too.
Bodies. Oh, and Alan Arkin, of course. And Warm Bodies, the kind of romantic zombie movie, which I didn't have any interest in until I found out it was from the director of 50/50, Jonathan Levine. So, yeah, Warm Bodies. Also in limited release, 2 documentaries worth noting. The Gatekeepers, which is nominated for an Academy Award, and Sound City, Dave Grohl's documentary about a music studio that was really near and dear to his heart, I understand.
Yes, and if that movie were playing here and there, I would lobby very hard to review that, because we have not reviewed a documentary, have we?
We did. Oh, no. No, we haven't.
I don't know if this is a true documentary, like it's about a serious subject, but sometime I'd like to eventually try our hands at that and maybe fall flat on our faces. But what are we picking out of this group, Jacob?
Well, we're going to do Warm Bodies. We went back and forth between Bullet to the Head and Warm Bodies. We literally flipped the DVD, and heads, of course, being Bullet to the Head, and tails being Warm Bodies, and it was tails. So, Warm Bodies it is, the zombie rom-com, which the zombies may talk in. I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen a lot about this movie. I'm very curious.
Well, if you're into necrophilia, this is the movie for you, it seems.
Ugh. All right. Well, you'll find out next week what we think about Warm Bodies.
And don't forget, on top of Warm Bodies, next week we'll be adding on to our FWOAC Franchise Flashback with the 3rd film in the Die Hard series. That's Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Very excited to revisit that film. For now, I'm Jacob Rosdale.
And I'm Patrick Boberg.
Thanks for listening.
And that's a wrap.
I'm finished.